So, hello, Mr. Strelecky. I'm so honored to meet you, and also a great pleasure to introduce you to the Romanian public. Today, we shall talk about your book, The Cafe on the Edge of the World. So, before my first question, I feel like sharing with you an exciting event in my life. My first book came on market today. So,
congratulations.
Thank you. So from authors, or better said, from wannabe author to author, I congratulate you as well for all your work.
Thank you. No, that's super exciting. I always say to people, there's a lot of people who say to me, I have an idea for a book. And then there's a very, very small percentage of them that actually take it to fruition. And it's a wonderful experience to have something that you thought of that came to you, that you dreamed of, become a reality. And it started with nothing but a thought and a blank piece of paper. And so congratulations to you. That's very exciting.
Thank you. So mainly what you've said was part of my first questions. How did the idea of this book that we are talking about today grew into your mind? Where did it come from?
Yeah. So when I was in my early 30s, I was in a career that I was well paid for it. I was very good at it, but I didn't really have a heart connection to what I was doing. And when I looked at people that were 10 years older than me, and I thought, okay, so if I keep doing what I'm doing, then in 10 years, I'll pretty much be like that person. And did I want to be that person? And the answer was no. Not that there was anything wrong with the life they were living. It just wasn't the life that I wanted to be living. And so I made a very large decision, which was I left everything behind and threw on a backpack and went to go see the world. And everyone said, okay, yeah, you do that maybe when you're 18 or 19, or maybe when you're 25 and you just get done with university. But that's not the kind of thing that you do when you're in the middle of your career and you're in your 30s. But honestly, Gabriela, I had reached the point where I just felt like time was passing me by. And I needed to do something really significant in alignment with my heart. And so I went and backpacked around the world, and it absolutely changed my life in so many ways. And when I came back from that experience, something inside of me said, sit down and start typing.
Oh, that's nice. But good for you, in my opinion, as a psychologist as well, is that you are not really old. I mean, okay, 18 to 25, you said normally people at this age might do that, but you still wasn't on a good age. Like, imagine this happened to you when you're much older. So what do you think that people who are a little bit older than 30 and they read the book and they might feel this? Do you have anything to say to them? It's your moment. You can do it no matter what's your age or.
Well, the conclusion I've come to is it's never too soon and it's never too late to take a dream and make it a reality. And so better to have 1 week on the road when I'm 85, if that's all I can handle, than to never have done it, or to try skiing, or to learn a new language or whatever. But yeah, it's better to have at least a few minutes of that experience than to not have it at all. And the sooner you can start, the better. I'm very grateful I did it when I was in my 30s as opposed to my 50s or 70s or 80s, no doubt.
So I wanted to ask you about the questions in the book, on the first book, and also I'm not going to say, maybe our readers will get to have the books, which I already have them, and see what's the relation between the questions that we have in the first book, and we'll let them see what happens in the next book. But I'm very curious if those answers came to you before starting your journey, or while you were on the journey. So I want to say the questions. Would you like to say the question first?
Sure. Yeah. So please. The first question that the character discovers in the back of the cafe menu is, why are you here? And it's not like, why are you in the cafe? It's the big, why are you here? Why do you exist? What is the purpose of your life? And the second one is, do you fear death? And the third one is, are you fulfilled? And I had found myself, Gabriela, asking myself those questions before I left on the trip. it was only through the process of doing something dramatic in alignment with my heart that I found the answers to those questions. So no, I didn't have the answers before I left on the trip, but certainly discovered them through the process of going on the trip. And then I would say that the way that the trip shifted me, and then I became an author and I get to do this kind of stuff, that in large part helped me say, yeah, I am fulfilled. I do what I want to do. I get the chance to do something that is very rewarding. I feel like it makes a difference in the lives of others. So yeah, came about after the trip.
So you had those questions in the back of your mind before the trip, but you found the answers while doing this trip. And this makes me go to the next question, where I think only when we are in a bad period of our lives, or only not very good events are happening to us, we decide to think of these questions? Or do you think people are usually thinking, but they do not have the courage, I don't know, to just answer them and go on the trip?
I can tell you what I've experienced in talking to many people, many readers who have come to me, and I can tell you in my own life. From the time that I was a little kid, I remember thinking, okay, let me get this straight. So most adults, like you go to school, you work really hard in school, and then you get out of school, and then you get a job. And, again, I'm thinking about this from a kid perspective, like when I was a kid and I'm looking out at the world. And so then you get a job, and most people don't like their job. And then you do that for 40 years and then you retire. But by then you're physically not very strong, and then you die. And I remember as a kid thinking, this is about the most messed up system I've ever seen. I mean, what? How does that make sense? But I was a kid and I couldn't conceptualize what would be a better way to do that. And then, as I got older, I realized that there are a few select people that I would come across who had chosen to do a job that was in alignment with their life's purpose. And they were excited to get up every day. And they were happy about the way that they spent their time. And they didn't need to go away to get recharged all the time. They actually enjoyed their life every single day. And so, the message that I try and share with people now is someone is out there living your dream life, and it might as well be you, because someone's going to be doing it. And whether that's backpacking to Africa, or opening up a bakery, or being an amazing parent who gets to stay home with their kid, the choice is yours. At the same time, allow yourself to realize that that is a choice. And if you make it, you'll probably end up being more excited on a Monday morning when you wake up. And if it sort of is made for you, then you probably won't be as excited on a Monday morning. But regardless, the days are ticking by. And so be careful about which choices you make.
That's a very nice idea. And I'm thinking, when you were writing the book, you were thinking that your life is changed, or your life is going to be improving from this point of view? Or did you think that your book will really change many other people's lives?
No, it was so crazy, Gabriela, because I didn't have a plan to be an author. It's not something that I had envisioned in my life at all. When I came back from that trip and something inside me said, sit down and type, I just started typing, and I actually wrote The Cafe on the Edge of the World in 21 days. It was very much of a stream of conscious typing experience. So I feel like the cafe, in a way, I get the chance to be the conduit for the message of the cafe, because it feels like the story came from somewhere else other than just inside my head. And I will say the validation of that is that in the process of writing, so I've written the fourth book in the Cafe series, will be coming out in 2022. In the process of writing the 4 books, like, there are things that the characters say, especially Casey, that is so wise and so brilliant that I know it didn't come from me. It had to be coming from somewhere else.
That's interesting. So you probably people would think that the cafe is a real place, or it's a place in the back of your mind. So you're telling me that somehow after you start your journey, things started to come to you.
Yeah, exactly. There's a connection which opens up when you start living the life that you want to live. And again, that could be a million different scenarios. Each person chooses that for themselves. But when you start living the life that you want to live, these connections start to happen. Moments of coincidence where you meet just the right person who can help you open the bakery that you've been dreaming to open since you were 7 years old. Or you thinking about traveling the world, ideally in non-COVID times. and you're thinking about going to New Zealand, and you sit down at the coffee shop and you look to your right and there's someone reading a book about New Zealand. Like, it's just amazing how these random coincidences, which aren't so random and not so coincidental, are all around us. The trick is to have the awareness of what is the life that I want to be living. Because if I don't know that, then even though the clues are everywhere around me, I don't recognize that they're clues.
Or maybe you decide not to see them because it's risky to see them.
Absolutely. Yes. And then I think that's one of the great opportunities for us as human beings, because there's pain in failure. And so if we've tried something before that was in alignment with our heart, and for whatever reason, it didn't work out, and we experience the pain of the failure, the pain of the loss, it's very tempting to say, I don't want to ever experience that again. But as I talk about in the Big Five for Life book that I wrote, that life is a series of ups and downs. And the only way that you can sort of lose the game of life is if you let yourself stay in the down. If that's where the journey ends for you, then, you've lost. However, if you allow yourself to rise out of that and believe that it's possible, listen, everybody fails. I've failed so many times, I couldn't even tell you. My books have been rejected by over 200 publishers around the world. 200 experts said, nah, I don't think anybody's going to want to read this. Right? This is a book that has been translated into 43 languages, 6-time bestseller of the year, millions and millions of copies sold, and 200 experts said, I don't think so. So if I would have let myself sit in that bottom spot, then I wouldn't be doing this wonderful interview with you. I wouldn't have the chance to travel to countries and meet amazing fans who say, this book has helped me change my life in a really good way. And so
you're the living proof. So you're the living proof.
That's the key, is like allow yourself to climb out of the bottom.
But do you think we have to go back from time to time to that place? And this, I want to make a connection to your second book. Do you think that once we answer those questions, maybe we start living the life that we want? Maybe we start living the dream that we've been dreaming from long time ago. You think we have to go back from time to time, or maybe we just lose again by taking things for granted?
I think it's very common that we figure it out and then we forget. And I'll give you a perfect example of that in my own life. So one of the most dramatic shifts that happened for me was a trip that I went on. And I remember coming back, and I was at the airport and I was waiting for someone to pick me up. And I had my journal, and I wrote in my journal, never forget that this world exists that I had just been experiencing. And you'd think like that was so profoundly shifting in my life that I would hold that with me forever. And then the next thing you know, I'm immersed in something and I've forgotten that it exists. Like it was a precursor to my big trip when I was in my 30s. And so I wish I could say that I'm as smart as the characters in my book, that they learn something, it stays with them forever. But no, sometimes I learn something and then I have to go back and relearn it again. And that's okay. Like one of the reasons I go back and reread some of my favorite books is because I'm always at a different place in my life, and I've learned different things. I'm experiencing different things. And when I go back and read the book, it's almost like, wow, I don't remember that part of the book being in there. Well, it's because when I read it last year or 5 years ago, that part wasn't relevant for me. But now in my moment today, it's very relevant. So great books have a timelessness to them because you can always learn something new as your own life is changing.
Exactly. Do you think only when people experience this kind of not very good events, they are ready to read this kind of books? Or do we have chance when we really feel good, read the book and...
Totally. Yeah. So, there's sort of the perception that is very present in our lives is that we're going to follow this pattern of unhappiness, the one that I was outlining that as a kid I could see. And then the story that you hear is the person's living that kind of life until they have the heart attack. And then they have the heart attack and they're on their way to the hospital in the ambulance. And they're like, no, I'm going to change my life in all kinds of dramatic ways. And so when the near death experience happens, that's when this dramatic shift happens for them. The problem with that is that a near death experience gets you very close to death. And sometimes you don't walk away from that. Sometimes that's where the journey ends. So far better, which is an excellent recommendation that you're making, is in the midst of your enlightened moments when you're feeling like I've got things figured out, things are going great. That's a great time to say, okay, so how can I even move my life higher on the experience instead of waiting for it to come down? So yeah, absolutely. There's no reason we wait until the downside to get more enlightened.
Yeah, that's because most of the people would do that choice. But I think it's important for most of us to know, even when we think our life is very good, we can go to that deep place where we could question ourselves and see where can we move a little bit higher or go a little bit deeper into our mind.
I would say it's actually easier in those times, having gone through it both ways, that when I'm in the midst of a lot of pain and a lot of struggle, it's harder to pull myself up to a place where I can see opportunity and see the good times coming back. But when I'm already in a positive place, I can much easier see the next level of positive impact that I could have, positive moments I could bring to my life. And so, yeah, it's an excellent point.
So I want to ask you if you have stories, if readers are writing to you, telling you how their life changed, and if there are from different countries.
Yeah, one of the most humbling and awesome aspects of what I do is the letters that people write. And I'm so grateful for that. I'm so grateful for technology that someone can send an email. If it was 50 years ago, they'd have to find a post office address and send me a physical letter. And now people can send their message via LinkedIn or email or Facebook or Instagram, whatever. So it's wonderful the way technology has progressed. And these stories constantly humble me. There's two that leap out as you're asking that question. One was from a young girl, 17 years old. And she said, you had signed a copy of a book. My mom had met you at a book signing, and you had signed a copy of a book for me. And when I sign books, Gabriela, I learned a long time ago that if I just stop and pause and quiet my mind for just a split second, and I know the first name of the person, that something will come to me, and I'll write for that particular person. And often after I've written it, I don't even remember what it was, but in that moment, it was very clear that that was the thing. And so I had written something very specific to this young lady, even though I had never met her. And she said, you've never met me, but you met my mom and you signed this book for me. And she said, at 17, I've been in and out of hospitals for many, many years with an eating disorder. And I've gone through counseling, I've gone through therapy, and nothing has helped me. And she said, but I've read your book, and for the first time in a very long time, I want to live. And I mean, that's just so humbling, right? To think that some message that came through me that I was allowed to be the conduit for has had that kind of an impact on a young kid who has their whole life ahead of them, if they can just allow themselves to see the potential that's out there. And so that was one that, sticks with me and will stick with me forever. Another one, I remember it was written to me by a guy who was a friend, and he said, and we've known each other for many, many years, and his mom and dad went through a very challenging divorce. And his mom went into a very dark depression. And he sent me a letter and said, listen, I didn't even tell you, he said, but I took a copy of your book and I gave it to my mom. And I said, just read this, and he said, for a long time, we've been wondering if she would ever come out of this depression. And I really think that reading the story of the cafe and the characters and the message in there has been the thing that's enabled her to turn the corner and start to see life in a positive way again. So that one was very precious to my heart because it was someone that I knew personally, even though I didn't know his mom at all. But I knew him. And to think that I had the book had a chance to make a positive impact on his family was just awesome. And that's two of thousands and thousands of the amazing stories that we get. So yeah, it's incredibly humbling. Do you have, I think you have this kind of posting from lots of countries that your book is been translated in the language of those countries. Do you feel there are differences between the cultural, environment and the way people see your book? Yeah. So, again, it's been translated in 43 languages, and it's probably in 60 or more countries because some of the countries have the same language. And so, yeah, you're talking about a wide variety of styles and cultures. And since I'm an avid traveler, I've gotten the chance to experience many of these different places. And yet, even with all of those differences, those three questions, why are you here? Do you fear death? Are you fulfilled? Connect with people on such a deep heart, soul level. And what I love about that is it tells me just how connected we all are. Yeah, we may grow up in different environments. We may have very different cultures, very different languages, but maybe at the core, the human experience is so for almost all of us is tied to these types of questions. And therefore we are all so connected.
That's the point I've asked you this question, because, for example, in Romania, we had many books of, I don't know, psychology, personal development. And in some parts, many people felt, okay, it's nice, but it's not on our tradition. It's not on how we feel. And this is what I felt about your book, that it doesn't have to have any culture, any place of the world, because most of the people would have thought at least once of this of these questions. And even if they didn't, these are questions that most of us, when we see them in front of our eyes, we say, oh, I didn't think about it. It doesn't have to be in English, in Turkish, in Russian, in Chinese. We just have to answer them. And I think this is the uniqueness of your book, that it's suitable, in my opinion, for any country that this book would go.
Thank you. I'm going to quote you on that. So when I talk to the rest of the publishers,
yes,
I love, because I love travel and I love meeting people from different countries and I love experiencing different cultures and I marvel at them. The very first time I ever traveled overseas, I went to Europe, and it was so different in so many ways from everything that I'd experienced in my life so far. And yet it was fully functioning, worked great. And that was such a big aha to me, to realize that just because it's done differently doesn't mean it's wrong. It's just done differently. And that's part of the joy of travel, is to experience things that are done differently and learn from them. And so I love the fact that the book does transport readers from all these different places in a way that's positive and has a big impact. And I've learned something really powerful, Gabriela, which is it's very easy for us to classify ourselves as something, and therefore that restricts our potential view of the world.
Exactly.
And so I've experienced this in specific countries that have very, very tight cultures. And so I won't name the country, but there's one in particular that I can think of where they would say, as an example, they would say, well, yes, but your story took place in a cafe and we don't have cafes. We have this, right? A different type of thing. And those things are only in the north part of the country, and I'm in the south part of the country. And, and they would come up with lots of reasons why it just couldn't work for that. And hearing the person describe that, what I realized was that the more filters we apply to ourselves, the less we're able to believe what is potentially possible in our lives. If I allow myself to say, I'm not just a person from this country, but I'm a human being. Well, that means that any major aha moment that any other human had anywhere else on the planet at any time in history could be applicable to me.
Exactly.
And so the broader I allow myself to classify myself, the more opportunities I have to live an amazing life. And that was a big aha for me.
It was the big aha for me now in this interview as well. So I will stick to this idea. We should think of ourselves not like citizens of I don't know what country, but as human beings. And at least as a human being, allow yourself answer some question, go live your dream, go live your life. So do you have a message usually for your readers, for the Romanian readers in particular, or just for the readers?
Well, so let me add one more point to what you just said, because here's the next iteration of that I had, which is, so for my first iteration was exactly what you just described. The second iteration was, I sometimes pick up major life clues from watching nature or watching animals or whatever. And so the next classification for myself that I'm constantly working on is, maybe I'm a living thing. And if I'm a living thing, that means I can learn something from every other living thing, whether it's a dog who's like super friendly. And I'm like, oh, you know what? That's a great life lesson, to be super friendly. He just taught me that, or whatever. But it's the larger I classify myself. And so I guess my overall message based on this interview, based on these questions, would be, I think one of the great opportunities in life is the chance for us to have a very open field of vision in terms of what we are capable of in our own lives. Every expert started off knowing nothing about what they became an expert in. And so whether your dream is to open up a business as an entrepreneur, to learn something that you thought you were never capable of learning, or to embark on an adventure to a country that you know nothing about, understand that you are 100% capable of doing any and all and 1,000 times more of anything that you can dream of.
John, thank you so much for this interview. It was a really life lesson, if you want my opinion, and taking this human being to a living thing and just let ourselves be. And no matter where we are, no matter what our dream is, I think it's a good lesson for everybody. But now I'm speaking to the Romanian public, which I encourage to take and buy your book, and at least start with the 3 questions, and then maybe going to a deeper place in their mind, and start thinking of themselves, as you said, as human beings, as living things, and take a lesson from everywhere and everything that they encounter on their road. So, John, thank you so very much for your interview. And hopefully we could see you in Romania someday.
I can't wait, actually. Yeah, Romania has been on my travel list for a while. And were it not for COVID, I'm sure I would have been there over the last 2 years to have a chance to interact with fans. But I will absolutely look forward to it in the very near future. And hopefully our next interview we can do in person.
Yes, thank you. I'm looking forward to it. So see you next time.
Sounds good. Thank you, Gabriela.
Thank you. Have a good day.